You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. So, what's trending?
Solidarity HealthShare is simple to help pay for affordable, quality health care. They enable the community to share in each other's eligible medical expenses. You choose the doctor that you want to see. Even integrative and alternative medical treatments are eligible. Solidarity HealthShare helps pay for NaPro Technology and costs associated with natural family planning. Solidarity HealthShare is dedicated to both faith and your health care. Information is available at solidarityhealthshare.org. Joining me today is my guest, Abby Johnson, here on Trending with Timmerie. It's a joy to have her. She's a former Planned Parenthood director. She is the author of Unplanned. If you haven't seen the movie, it's time for a movie night, because this is a movie you don't want to miss, especially maybe once the quarantine is over. You can host a movie night, invite some people who haven't quite worked out their position on abortion, contraception, some of those other important issues. Abby Johnson is also the founder of the organization And Then There Were None, where she helps other people who had worked in the abortion industry to come out and really find that true joy. Abby Johnson, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Could you give, for those people who aren't aware of your story, just a brief snapshot, maybe a preview as to why people should watch Unplanned if they haven't yet?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just a pretty good look of what it's like inside of the abortion industry. I mean, it's I think, a pretty fair look at both sides of the debate. I mean, I always tell people, if you support abortion, you should watch the film. If you're pro-life, you should watch the film. If you know that if you believe that abortion is something that should be available, then you need to know what you support. I think that it is something that pro-choicers should watch. Know what you believe, know what it is that you are a champion for. And if you are pro-life, a lot of people, they told me, well, why would I want to watch this film? I'm already pro-life. It's an important film for even pro-lifers to see, because we need to know why we're pro-life. And sometimes even ourselves, we need encouragement. And I think it's easy for us to feel like, we feel run down, we feel tired. This is it is a battle. And I think that the film helps give us encouragement and really reminds us of why we're doing the work that we do.
Abby, you actually converted to Catholicism after having left Planned Parenthood. We're talking about happiness and really finding that authentic joy in our lives. Can you share a little bit about your conversion and specifically what led you to choose Catholicism?
Yeah, it was it was a long process. I don't think it was any one thing. I started when I was Episcopalian. I grew up Baptist, and I was Episcopalian when I worked at Planned Parenthood, because the Episcopal Church, anything goes. And their national doctrine supports abortion. So the people that I went to church with at the Episcopal Church, they all supported Planned Parenthood. They were all donors to Planned Parenthood. Our Episcopalian priest was very supportive of the work that I did. And so when I left Planned Parenthood, I was actually kicked out of the Episcopal Church, was told I wasn't welcome back into the Episcopal Church of America because I was publicly pro-life, which was fine. I knew I didn't want to attend the Episcopal Church anymore, but I sort of wanted to fire them, I guess. I left, and I was really sort of searching, and one thing I knew that I loved was liturgy. And I hadn't grown up with, in a liturgical style church, but I loved that. And so my husband grew up Lutheran. So we really started, searching, and all of our new friends, because when I left Planned Parenthood, I left everything behind. It wasn't just leaving a job. I left my friends. I left, now my faith community. And so I had to, have all these new friends. My new friends, they all happen to be Catholic, and I grew up pretty anti-Catholic, so, they were all like, oh, come to Mass. And I was like, ugh, no way. You worship Mary. And so I was like, no, thanks. And they finally, they kept on and on about it. And so I told my husband, let's just go, and we'll say we hated it, and then they'll get off our back. So that's what we decided to do. So we showed up, at Mass one day, and with that plan, in place. And I don't know, we sat there in Mass and we were both sort of surprised. We just felt at peace and found it, oddly similar to the liturgy at the Episcopalian Church, which we felt very comfortable with and loved. And I guess it made us want to know more. And so as soon as we told our new friends that, we were sitting in the middle of an RCIA class, we started reading. My husband and I started reading. I, read the Catechism from front to back, and my husband read Theology of the Body, and I started reading encyclicals and a lot of the questions that I had growing up, about faith and just a lot of questions, interpretation of Scripture and things like that. They just were answered. And so, after a lot of reading, after a lot of prayer, and just searching together as a couple and individually, we knew that we had found our home in the church. And so we actually ended up coming into the church together, Easter Vigil of 2012.
Wow, it's incredible. And I love how at the heart of your story, you're really touching on inquisitiveness, that you're willing to search out the answers and really come to understand, what's truth, what's real, why does this matter? And as we were talking a little before you joined us, we're talking about how millennials right now are so stressed out and they say they have too many choices before them. And this is their number one complaint. But it sounds to me like once you left Planned Parenthood, you saw that, yes, there are a lot of choices out there, but you started looking for the right answers. And when we have friends who are willing to point us in the right direction, when we have good friends who truly want our happiness, we're going to see that, kind of pieces start to fall into place, and there's that element of joy that starts to enter in. So tell me kind of some of the greatest fruits that you found after having converted to Catholicism, especially in those first couple of years. How did it change things in a good way?
Well, I think probably the most obvious is just the rapid expansion of our family. When we, we started looking into Catholicism, it was just the three of us, Doug, me, and our daughter Grace, and now we have 8 children, so we're a family of 10. So there was definitely this openness to life that evolved, and it wasn't compulsory. It wasn't like we said, well, now we're Catholic, so I guess, now we've got to be open to life. It wasn't that. It was just really this joy that came with being open to life and a desire to be open to life. That was new for me because I'm an only child, and I grew up with sort of that mentality. You get married, you get on birth control, you stay on birth control until you hit menopause. And so there was never that openness growing up. There was, I don't know, it was just a different, definitely a contraceptive sort of mentality, even throughout marriage. And so that was sort of new, and brought about a different sort of joy in my marriage and in my life. And I think just constantly being inquisitive. I realized that my whole life I felt like I had been wrestling with God. And I finally just came to the understanding that I felt like I was always fighting with God instead of realizing that He just wants to fight for me. That was really a paradigm shift in my life. That He wasn't trying to fight with me; He was just trying to fight for me, and really just giving this surrender to Him, and just this understanding that my life is really not my own. Yeah, I make the choices of my life, but I just have to submit to His will. I just came to this conclusion that I didn't want to wrestle with God anymore. I really did want to submit. There came just this, I don't know. You think that that submission would bring about anxiety, but it doesn't. It brings about this freedom that it's really hard to explain.
It's incredible.
That's what the Catholic Church brought about for me. People say, oh, the Catholic Church is so rigid and all these rules, and it's all so bound up. But for me, the rules actually brought about freedom because that's what children want, right? Children want boundaries, and we are children of God.
Right.
So all children want boundaries. We want to know where the rules are, what the rules are, how far can we go. And so when you leave it up to man to interpret all the scripture the way that they want, then the boundaries are all over the place. And this guy says you can go this far, but this guy interprets it this way, and he says you can go this far. And that leaves all this confusion. And so the rules are all over the place, and that creates internal struggle inside of man. And so it creates this turmoil inside of us, and then we wrestle. So having the magisterium of the church say, no, this is where we stand on this, and this is the boundary, and this is how far you can go, that actually brought about great freedom in my life.
It's reasonable.
For the first time, it actually gave me the permission to fully submit and surrender.
It's reasonable too, and I think that when we see that there's someone who cares for us this much, and what they're saying is reasonable, and at the heart of the whole thing of what you're saying is, I love how you posed it as either I was going to wrestle with God, or essentially he was going to actually reach out and want to fight for me. And he had been the whole time. That's Abby Johnson. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmerie. That's such a profound moment. And I think that especially for young women in particular, Abby, and I know that you can speak to this as well after having worked with so many women, that this is at the heart of what so many women want, whether they're looking toward, a significant other, whether they're looking toward their father, whether they're looking to our Heavenly Father. They want to know that someone is willing to love them so much that they will fight for them. And because they don't see that love in their lives so often, I think that this is why they turn to the unfortunate decisions that they do surrounding, abortion, contraception, and kind of safe relationships that are actually harmful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're so right. I was actually just having this conversation today, actually, with someone. Look, secular feminism can say what they will, but inside of a woman's heart is the innate desire to be protected and to be protected by a man. Mm-hmm. That's the way that God has made us. That's why we're made to have fathers. That's why the Holy Family was set up as it was, for a man to be the protector of the family, for a woman to be the caretaker, to be the nurturer of the family. I mean, he didn't make a mistake when he set up the family, the Holy Family. And so, feminism can say whatever it wants to about women not needing men and blah, blah, blah. But the perfect design of the family was for a woman to be with a man, and for the man to protect not only her body, but to protect her heart. And And that's what every little girl desires. Every little girl in her heart desires to have a wedding to a man. That's what every little girl desires, and that's what we have to desire in our Father in Jesus, that he also protect us and to protect our hearts.
Absolutely. That's Abby Johnson, former Planned Parenthood clinic director. We'll be right back with Abby, and we'll dive into topics of feminism and motherhood. Don't go away.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
My guest today is Abby Johnson, who has brought to us the raw, real story of her own conversion from having worked in the pro-abortion movement as a director of Planned Parenthood, even being an employee of the year for them, to radically transforming to this pro-life position and converting to Catholicism. And if you weren't with us before, I just have to say, you've got to go back and listen to this episode, because just the rawness of her conversion and how it's transformed her has been incredible. And Abby, just before the last segment, we were talking about motherhood and how kind of the biggest thing that changed is, you're open to life and you've had this family and it's radically changed your marriage. But I imagine motherhood was looked at very differently from going from kind of a very secular feminism that you mentioned before to a Catholic view of women. Talk to me about how that changed for you.
I can say that motherhood in the place where I was, at Planned Parenthood, and not just at Planned Parenthood, but yeah, in the view of secular feminism. And, I definitely saw myself as a very rabid secular feminist at that time. Motherhood was viewed as an inconvenience. Mm-hmm. I was thinking back after I left Planned Parenthood, I was thinking back to my 8 years there at the clinic. And I was thinking about all that time there and all of the coworkers, all of the people that I worked with. I mean, these were women who, a few were, of non-childbearing years. But for the most part, everyone that I worked with was in their childbearing years. And of all of the people that I worked with, I was the only one who had a child.
Wow.
In those 8 years. And many got pregnant. I mean, many of my coworkers got pregnant. But if they got pregnant, abortion was available to them at no cost. That's part of working at the clinic. And so they would opt to have an abortion because motherhood is seen as an inconvenience. And in fact, it's seen as weakness. And when I worked at the clinic, I remember being so excited when I finally got past 24 weeks gestation in my pregnancy, because in Texas at the time, you could not have an elective abortion past 24 weeks.
So
and I knew then that the comments about me having an abortion would finally stop when I got past 24 weeks, because almost every day my coworkers would make a comment, it's not too late. We could take care of that for you. And, Grace was a very wanted baby, but they are relentless, and children are an inconvenience, and they're seen as really a detriment to your career. And so, thinking back, I think, okay, at this time when I saw myself as a secular feminist and all of the women who came, the thousands and thousands of women who came through my door and into my office at the clinic, I can't think of one time that I actually sat down and tried to empower the woman who was sitting across from me. I mean, if a woman came in and she said, gosh, I just found out I'm pregnant and I'm in school, and how am I going to do this with a baby? My answer was not, gosh, you are strong enough to do this. You can absolutely have a baby and finish school. Yes, you are strong enough to. My answer to her was, essentially, well, man, that would be hard. And you are definitely not strong enough to do that. So let's abort that baby. Or, well, I'm going to be doing this alone. I'm going to be a single mom. And my answer wasn't, well, yeah, that's going to be a challenge, but you absolutely can do this on your own. You absolutely can do it. My answer was, well, yeah, there's no way you can do this on your own. Here's some resources that can help you. My answer was, yeah, too weak to do that. Let's get you an abortion. Yeah. That's not empowerment.
Right. And it's so true, Abby, because I've worked in the crisis pregnancy centers and I've seen the incredible things that these women are capable of. And of course, the picture perfect ideal is not for these moms to be alone raising these children and have so many burdens on their backs. But the reality is that they can when they have to. And when we're called to, women are capable. And, I've seen these women where they've been inside the crisis pregnancy centers while, the little baby's being taken care of by the counselor as the girl's finishing a final paper or taking an exam there at the computer in the crisis pregnancy center. I mean, these are the things that our crisis pregnancy centers do. They do empower women. They do help women, and they call on all the resources that are necessary to make this happen. And it's fascinating because the pro-abortion movement, individuals just don't get it. Where does that help come from? Where does that care come from? They can't fathom that people could care for them that much. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. That's Abby Johnson. Abby, I want to talk about the word feminism here for a second, because there's a lot of, I think, animosity toward using the word feminism or saying I'm a feminist, because, we have such radical forms of feminism in society. And when you say you're a feminist, people automatically think that you think there are no differences between men and women, you're pro LGBTQ rights, and that you're pro abortion and contraception. Yet, on the other side, when we say we're not feminists, people think that we're anti-woman. So where do you stand on this it's a language battle, but what are your thoughts?
When I first came into the pro-life movement, I really felt like we've got to take back this language. We've got to take back the word feminism. We have to reclaim it. And, St. John Paul II talked about a new kind of feminism, right? And he didn't tell us what it was. He didn't name it for us, And so we're sort of left, right, with, well, what is it? We know what it looks like. He explained to us what it looks like, and it's not what current feminism is. It's not what the current wave of feminism is. It's not what the previous wave of feminism was. And dare I say, it's not what any new wave of feminism is going to look like. Right. Because feminism has gone down a very dangerous path that I don't believe is going to be changed. It's going to continue to become more androgynous. We're going to see a push for women to become more masculine, and there's going to be less of a dividing line between the sexes. And that's not any sort of feminism that St. John Paul II would have called for. So now we're sort of looking and saying, okay, well, is it feminism at all? And I'm not really sure that it is. Now we're sort of we're sort of looking back and saying, okay, well, then what is it? And honestly, for me, I think it's more of a call to femininity more than feminism.
Yeah. Some people, just kind of throw it in here too, some people object to femininity because they feel like it sounds soft. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think, you know what? I think it's okay to be soft. I think that it's okay to say innately we are softer than men, right? Because we are. We are more nurturers, right? That's who we're made to be. I can say that I am softer with my children than my husband is. That's not true in business. When it comes to business deals, I'm not definitely. My husband would be softer in that area, right? When it comes to spiritual formation, my husband is stronger than I am. That's the way it should be. When it comes to taking care of our family, my husband is stronger because that's the way it should be. So I think when we're talking about, a lot of times, we hear, I think we have to go back to gender roles, what they are. And a lot of times we hear people say, men are supposed to be providers, and we have a certain view of what that means. And it means that, they have to be the one that makes all the money, and they have to be the one that does X, Y, and Z. But really, biblically, what does it mean? And it means that they are to be the spiritual leader of the household. And right now, we're in a place where that is not the case in many households. And I've lived in that situation where I emasculated my husband. I did not allow him to be the spiritual leader in our home, and it almost broke our marriage. And I've seen the damage that feminism can do in a marriage, and I have seen the good that softness in a marriage, softness and femininity can do in a marriage, allowing my husband to lead as he should. I've allowed that to happen in our marriage, and I've seen the healing that can take place. While I can still be tough and strong in business, I can also be soft, and I can also allow my husband to be strong and lead our family in issues of importance and in issues where God has commanded that he lead.
Abby, thank you for being so raw, because I think that a lot of women need to hear this. And, a lot of women get worked up by the word feminism. They get worked up by the idea of being soft, of sounding feminine. And even just your testimony alone surrounding kind of your interaction with your husband. I want to touch on this last question with you how would you advise women who are having a difficult time? I think that there's a lot of emasculating being done of men, of husbands, of boyfriends even, and they go along with it, yet the answer is really how we as women treat our men. And so what advice from your own experience do you have for women that's practical to help work through that and to be able to separate, the working career world from how you interact with your spouse or possible significant other one day?
Honestly, Timmerie, it was mainly through my words. I had to really look at how I spoke to my husband. And a lot of it, and I mean, gosh, listeners, don't crucify me over this, but I looked at the way that husbands were portrayed on television, the way that fathers were portrayed on television, and they're portrayed as idiots.
It's true.
I thought, oh my gosh, I saw myself and the way that I spoke to my husband in these television lives. I just thought, oh my gosh, that's how I speak to my husband. And I thought it was funny because I was like, oh, that's exactly how I talk to Doug.
Right.
And I would laugh about it. And I thought, oh my gosh, one day that realization hit me and I thought, oh my gosh, that's wrong. That is not God honoring. That's not honoring to my husband. And I really had to pray about it, but if I'm honest, it took practice and it took a lot of humility. And I had to, just really humbly apologize to my husband through a lot of tears. Just apologize for seriously emasculating him for years and not allowing him to lead in our home. And my words had been so hurtful. And the saddest part, honestly, was that I had done it for so long, he hadn't even realized that it had been going on for so long. And once I pointed it out, he then realized how hurtful it had been.
Yeah, men adapt.
Yes,
they adapt to their surroundings, and that's something that I think men are very good at. And so he adapted to the normal within your relationship, and it sounds like it was an absolute grace from God, and you being open to that grace to see that there's a different calling for femininity and masculinity and how men and women interact. And it sounds like there was probably a lot of, repentance and tongue biting. And you're talking about outright behavior modification that I'm sure has taken years to overcome, but at the same time, what have the fruits been?
I can tell you, I hear people, we have, people who say, oh, my husband and I got in this huge fight. And I can tell you that since Doug and I, have gone through this journey and since I've left Planned Parenthood, I can honestly tell you that Doug and I have never, since we've gone through really that healing time in our marriage and we've really processed, everything that we went through at Planned Parenthood, and I have given him back his rightful place in our marriage as the leader of our marriage and the leader of our home. And I've really, repented and we've gone through this, I've really apologized to him for that, this emasculation. I can tell you that Doug and I, we do not fight in our marriage. Now, we bicker. We get on each other's nerves sometimes, right? Because that's just human. But we do not fight. There is truly peace in our marriage because the balance has been struck in our marriage. We do not have fights. We are truly at peace with one another. And it's Doug and I could not be more different. It's not because our personalities are just completely, compatible or anything like that. We are as different as the East is from the West. We are completely different. But it works because we have so much respect for one another and because we let each other, we know our place in our marriage and we allow each other to grow in that place in our marriage, and we respect those boundaries, and we don't cross them. And that makes for true peace and happiness in our marriage.
That's Abby Johnson sharing the incredible testimony of her story and how it didn't just change her to being, leaving Planned Parenthood to being pro-life. She became Catholic. It changed her marriage. It changed her family. You can find her at abbyjohnson.org. Don't we all want that peace and joy within a relationship, within a marriage? That just absolute comfort and solace in the context. Abby, thank you so much for joining us again. You can find her at abbyjohnson.com, and we'll be sure to tweet out links to that as well.
You can listen to more of Trending with Timmerie via the Relevant Radio app or at relevantradio.com/trending.